The catalyst of courage. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, as televisions across America flickered with the familiar buzz of a heated political debate. It was a scene most families had grown accustomed to. Fiery arguments, sharp exchanges, and bold declarations. But tonight was different. Tonight, something unexpected would ignite a spark that would ripple far beyond the walls of the debate hall. In their luxurious but warm Florida home, the Trump family sat together. The air carried an undercurrent of unease as Senator John Grayson, infamous for his sharp tongue and polarizing rhetoric, took to the stage. The room was silent, save for the hum of the television, as Grayson's words pierced through the evening. "Some people," he said with a smirk that sent chills down spines, "pretend to embody grace and dignity. But let's not forget, Melania Trump, for all her appearances, is just a trophy wife. No substance, no achievements." The words landed like a slap, reverberating through living rooms across the nation. People gasped in disbelief. Others reached for their phones, already composing tweets of outrage. But in the Trump residence, the youngest member of the family, Barron Trump, sat frozen. His hands, once relaxed, now curled into fists. His face, calm and reserved, betrayed a storm brewing within. He looked at his mother. Melania Trump sat poised, her face an impenetrable mask of calm. But Barron knew her well. He saw the slight twitch of her jaw, the faint tightening of her hands. He saw the pain she hid behind her stoic demeanor. A lump formed in his throat. This was the woman who had faced the harshest of criticisms with unyielding grace. The woman who had taught him about kindness and resilience. And now she was being reduced to a mere caricature by a man who didn't know the first thing about her. "Mom, are you okay?" Barron asked, his voice low and steady. Melania turned to him, her eyes soft and warm. "I'm fine, Barron," she said, her accent lacing the words with a familiar melody. "Words are just that, words. They cannot define who I am." Her response, though calm, only fueled the fire inside him. For years, Barron had been a quiet observer, content to let the world talk while he stayed in the background. But this was different. This was personal. Barron excused himself, retreating to his room. The air felt heavy as he paced back and forth, his mind replaying Grayson's cruel words. He felt powerless, a mere teenager caught in the shadow of a powerful legacy. But deep down, he knew he couldn't let this moment pass. He sat down at his desk, his fingers hovering over the keyboard of his laptop. At first, he considered posting a message on social media, a heartfelt tribute to his mother. But as he typed, an idea began to form in his mind. A bold, risky idea. "This isn't enough," he muttered to himself. "A tweet won't change anything." Barron took a deep breath, reaching out to a trusted friend of his father's, a media insider who had always been supportive of the family. The call was brief but urgent. He explained his plan, his voice trembling with emotion, but laced with determination. "You want to go live?" the insider asked, taken aback. "Barron, this is serious. Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Barron replied. "This isn't just about my mother. It's about respect. It's about standing up for what's right." The insider hesitated, then finally relented. "All right, I'll set it up. But know this, once you do this, there's no going back." As Barron ended the call, a wave of nervous energy washed over him. He was stepping into uncharted territory, risking public scrutiny and backlash. But the thought of his mother's silent strength pushed him forward. This wasn't about him. It was about defending her honor and showing the world the woman he knew. The next morning, Barron woke early, the weight of his decision pressing on him. He found his mother in the kitchen, quietly sipping her tea. She looked up as he entered, her expression softening. "Good morning, Barron," she said. "You seem different today." He hesitated, then sat down across from her. "Mom, I need to do something," he began, his voice steady but earnest. "I need to speak out. For you, for everything you've endured." Melania studied him for a long moment, her gaze penetrating yet kind. "Barron, defending someone you love is noble," she said, her words measured. "But remember, do it with grace. Do it with truth." Her words lingered in his mind as he prepared for the evening ahead. This wasn't just about proving a point. It was about honoring the values she had instilled in him. As the hours ticked by, Barron steeled himself for what was to come. By the time the debate resumed that night, Barron was ready. The stage was set, the cameras rolling, and the world watching. Senator Grayson, emboldened by his earlier remarks, seemed more smug than ever. But Barron wasn't deterred. He had a plan, and he was about to make his voice heard. When the moment came, he didn't hesitate. Dressed in a simple but elegant black suit, he walked into the studio, his tall frame and determined expression commanding attention. The room fell silent as he stepped onto the stage, interrupting the ongoing debate. "Excuse me," he began, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "I have something to say." All eyes turned to him, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Barron Trump, the quiet and reserved youngest son of the former president, had just become the center of attention, and he wasn't backing down. This sets the stage for the story to unfold further, with Barron's actions creating a ripple effect of inspiration and transformation. Let me know if you'd like to continue with the next part. A Voice for Grace. The studio buzzed with tension as Barron Trump stood under the glaring studio lights. The room, previously alive with the cacophony of debate, fell silent. His unexpected entrance had frozen everyone, from seasoned politicians to veteran reporters. Cameras adjusted their focus, zooming in on the tall, composed figure of the young man standing confidently at center stage. Barron's deep voice broke the silence. "Good evening. My name is Barron Trump," he began, his tone steady yet charged with emotion. "And I'm here to defend my mother and everything she stands for." The collective gasp was palpable, rippling through the audience like a wave. In the control room, producers scrambled to adjust their programming. Knowing this unscheduled moment was already making history, Senator Grayson leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at his lips. "And why, young man, do you believe you have a place here tonight?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Barron turned to face him, his gaze unwavering. "Because sometimes silence is complicit," he said firmly. "And I refuse to be complicit when someone as remarkable as my mother is disrespected." The tension in the room thickened, but Barron pressed on. "You see, Senator Grayson," he continued, "it's easy to reduce someone to a label when you don't know their story. But let me tell you about Melania Trump, not as a public figure, but as a person, as a mother, as an immigrant who embodies the very values this country was built on." The audience sat spellbound as Barron spoke. He described his mother's journey, how she left her home country to chase the American dream, how she worked tirelessly as a model to support herself, and how she eventually became a first lady who faced criticism with quiet dignity. "She has been called names, ridiculed, and dismissed," Barron said, his voice growing stronger. "But through it all, she has remained steadfast, not for herself, but for the people she represents, immigrants, mothers, women who are often overlooked or underestimated." He paused, scanning the room. "And what does she get in return? To be mocked on national television by someone who claims to uphold the values of this nation." Senator Grayson's smirk faltered. For the first time, he looked uneasy. But Barron wasn't finished. "You talk about substance, Senator," Barron said, his gaze piercing. "Let me tell you about substance. Substance is raising a child to value kindness over cruelty. Substance is standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. Substance is leading by example, even when no one is watching." Applause erupted from a section of the audience. Barron's words resonated deeply, striking a chord with viewers across the nation. His passion, his eloquence, and his sheer determination were captivating. Meanwhile, in the Trump family's living room, Melania watched the broadcast with tears brimming in her eyes. She had always known Barron had a quiet strength, but seeing him stand up for her in such a public and powerful way filled her heart with pride. Back in the studio, Barron turned his attention to the cameras. "To everyone watching tonight," he said, "this isn't just about my mother. This is about all the people who have ever been underestimated or belittled. It's about reminding the world that dignity and respect are not privileges. They are rights." He stepped closer to the podium, his voice now filled with raw emotion. "My mother has taught me many things, but the most important lesson is this. True strength lies in grace. And tonight, I stand here to show the world what grace looks like." The room erupted in applause. Even some of the senators, initially skeptical of his presence, clapped in acknowledgement of his courage. Senator Grayson, meanwhile, looked visibly uncomfortable, his earlier bravado completely dismantled. As Barron walked off the stage, the cameras followed him, capturing every moment of his exit. The whispers in the room grew louder, and social media exploded with praise for his heartfelt speech. Within minutes, hashtags like #Barron Trump and #StandWithMelania were trending worldwide. But for Barron, the applause and accolades didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet smile on his mother's face when he returned home that night. Melania embraced him tightly, her voice soft but filled with pride. "You were incredible, Barron," she said, "not because you defended me, but because you spoke the truth with courage and kindness. That is the greatest gift you could give." Barron nodded, his heart swelling with emotion. He had done what he set out to do, not just for his mother, but for everyone who believed in the power of grace and resilience. But little did he know, this was only the beginning. His impromptu speech had sparked a nationwide conversation, one that would challenge perceptions and redefine the narrative around Melania Trump and countless others like her. The next morning, as the sun rose over the Florida coastline, Barron woke to a flood of messages, some from friends, others from strangers who had been moved by his words. Among them was a note from a young immigrant woman who shared her story of perseverance and strength, inspired by Melania and now by Barron. "You gave me hope," she wrote. "Thank you for reminding me that our stories matter." Barron sat back, his heart full. For the first time, he felt a sense of purpose beyond himself. And as he looked out the window at the rising sun, he realized that his journey was far from over. He had found his voice, and he intended to use it, not just for his family, but for all those who needed a champion. This part establishes Barron's impactful response and its immediate effects while setting the stage for broader consequences. Let me know if you'd like to move to part 3. The ripple effect. The sun crept through the windows of the Trump residence, its golden rays illuminating the tranquil morning. But inside, the air was anything but calm. Phones rang incessantly, messages flooded inboxes, and reporters camped outside the gates, all clamoring for a piece of the story that had captured the nation's attention overnight. Barron Trump sat in the quiet corner of the living room, his phone buzzing with an endless stream of notifications. He scrolled through messages from friends, strangers, and even a few public figures, all expressing their admiration for his courage and eloquence. For someone who had largely avoided the public eye, the sudden spotlight was overwhelming. But it wasn't the praise that held his attention. It was the personal stories. Among the outpouring of support were messages from individuals who felt seen and heard for the first time. A single mother wrote about her struggles to balance work and parenting, thanking Barron for highlighting the quiet strength of women like her. An immigrant shared her journey of resilience, inspired by Melania's example and Barron's tribute. Barron read each story carefully, his chest tightening with a mix of emotions. These were more than words. They were windows into lives shaped by struggle and perseverance. He realized that his speech had tapped into something far greater than a defense of his mother. It had awakened a shared yearning for dignity and respect. A movement begins. Across the country, the impact of Barron's speech began to unfold. News channels replayed the clip of his unexpected entrance, dissecting every word and gesture. Panel discussions debated the significance of his message, with commentators praising his poise and authenticity. Barron Trump did something remarkable, said one prominent journalist during a morning show. He reminded us of the humanity behind the headlines. His defense of his mother wasn't just personal. It was a call to treat one another with respect. Social media, too, buzzed with activity. Hashtags like #BarronSpeaks and #RespectAndDignity trended for days. Celebrities and influencers joined the conversation, sharing their own stories of resilience and advocating for a culture of kindness. Even those who had previously been critical of the Trump family found themselves reevaluating their views. Regardless of politics, one commentator tweeted, "We must acknowledge the courage it takes for an 18-year-old to stand before the world and speak his truth." Barron Trump has set an example we can all learn from. The Classroom Challenge. Back in Florida, Barron's life took an unexpected turn. The day after his speech, he returned to his private school, unsure of what to expect. He had always preferred to blend into the background, but now, every pair of eyes seemed to follow him as he walked down the halls. "Hey, Barron," a classmate called out, jogging to catch up with him. "That was amazing, man. What you said last night, it really hit home." Barron offered a small smile, feeling a mix of pride and discomfort. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, but as more students approached him throughout the day, he began to see the positive side. His words had sparked conversations, even among his peers. In his history class, the teacher decided to forego the planned lecture and instead opened the floor to a discussion about the role of empathy in leadership. "Barron, would you like to share your perspective?" the teacher asked. Barron hesitated, then nodded. "I think we often forget that the people we criticize are human, too," he said, his voice steady but thoughtful. "It's easy to tear someone down when you don't know their story. But if we take the time to listen and understand, we might find more in common than we think." The classroom fell silent, and then, one by one, students began sharing their own thoughts. The discussion was raw and honest, touching on topics ranging from social media toxicity to the pressures of living up to expectations. By the end of the hour, Barron realized that his words had created a ripple effect even here, among his classmates. A mother's wisdom. That evening, Barron sat with his mother on their back patio, the soft sound of waves crashing against the shore in the distance. Melania, as always, radiated calm. She sipped her tea, her eyes reflecting both pride and concern. "You've started something big, Barron," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "But with that comes responsibility." Barron nodded. "I know, Mom. I've been thinking about it all day. I didn't expect this reaction, but now that it's here, I want to do something meaningful with it." Melania reached out, placing a hand on his. "Good. But remember, staying true to yourself is the most important thing. The world will try to shape you, to pull you in different directions. You must decide what you stand for and hold on to it, no matter what." Her words resonated deeply with Barron. He had always admired her strength, but now he saw the wisdom behind it. He understood that his actions had consequences, not just for himself, but for everyone who looked up to him. The challenge of critics. Not everyone was moved by Barron's speech. Predictably, there were detractors who questioned his motives, accused him of seeking attention, or dismissed his words as naive idealism. Pundits debated whether his actions were genuine or orchestrated, and online trolls hurled insults behind the anonymity of their keyboards. Barron read some of the criticism, feeling a pang of frustration. But then he remembered his mother's advice. "Their words cannot define you." Instead of reacting defensively, Barron chose a different approach. He began drafting an op-ed for a major news outlet, addressing the criticism head-on. In it, he wrote, "I am not a politician, nor do I aspire to be one. I am simply a son who loves his mother and believes in standing up for what's right. My actions were not about seeking attention, but about giving voice to the values my mother taught me. Respect, resilience, and grace. If that makes me naive, then so be it. I would rather be naive than indifferent." The op-ed went viral, earning praise for its maturity and sincerity. Even some of his harshest critics acknowledged the authenticity of his message. Seeds of a movement. Over the following weeks, Barron's actions began to coalesce into something larger. Inspired by the response to his speech, he launched a campaign called Stand with Grace, aimed at promoting empathy and respect in public discourse. The initiative partnered with schools, community organizations, and online platforms to foster conversations about kindness and understanding. Through public appearances, interviews, and social media, Barron became an unexpected advocate for change. He remained humble, always redirecting the focus to the values he hoped to inspire rather than himself. And through it all, Melania stood by his side, offering guidance and support. Together, they became a symbol of resilience and grace, a mother and son united by their shared belief in the power of respect. As Barron lay in bed one night, reflecting on the whirlwind of events, he felt a sense of clarity he had never known before. The journey wasn't easy, and the challenges were far from over. But for the first time, he felt truly alive, driven by a purpose greater than himself. This was just the beginning. The unseen struggle. The weeks following Barron's speech were a whirlwind of activity, emotions, and challenges. What had begun as a spontaneous act of courage had spiraled into a national conversation. While the public largely praised Barron's words and actions, the reality behind the scenes was far more complex. In the Trump residence, the atmosphere was a mix of pride and tension. Melania, though deeply touched by her son's actions, remained concerned about the pressure he was under. She had spent years navigating the storm of public scrutiny and knew all too well the toll it could take. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Barron's phone buzzed incessantly with calls and notifications. He glanced at it briefly before setting it face down on the table, his jaw tightening. "Barron," Melania said softly, her voice cutting through the hum of the room. "You've been working hard, but you must find time to rest." "I'm fine, Mom," Barron replied, though his tone betrayed his exhaustion. "There's just so much to do. The campaign is gaining momentum, and people are counting on me." Melania studied her son, her heart aching for him. "You have a kind heart, Barron," she said, "but you cannot pour from an empty cup. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's necessary." Barron nodded, but the weight of responsibility lingered heavily on his shoulders. For every message of support he received, there were also harsh criticisms, and even threats. Online trolls dissected his every move, while political commentators debated his motives. Some dismissed him as a privileged teenager dabbling in activism. Others accused him of being a pawn in a larger political game. The cost of courage. One night, Barron sat alone in his room, scrolling through his social media feed. A particularly cruel comment caught his eye. "Just another rich kid trying to play hero. No one cares about your fake movement." The words stung more than he cared to admit. He closed the app, tossing his phone onto the bed, and leaned back in his chair. For a moment, doubt crept into his mind. Was he doing enough? Was he doing too much? Did any of it even matter? He thought about the stories people had shared with him. The single mother, the immigrant, the bullied teenager who found solace in his words. Their voices were a reminder of why he had started this journey in the first place. But even so, the pressure was suffocating. Melania found him sitting in the dark later that night, his head in his hands. Without a word, she sat beside him, her presence calm and reassuring. "Barron," she began gently, "you are carrying a heavy burden, but you must remember that you are not alone." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with frustration. "I just don't know if I'm doing the right thing, Mom. What if I fail? What if I make things worse?" Melania placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "Failure is not the opposite of success. It is a part of it," she said. "Every step you take, even the missteps, brings you closer to understanding your purpose. Trust yourself, and trust the values you stand for." Her words settled over him like a balm, easing the storm within. For the first time in days, Barron allowed himself to breathe deeply. He wasn't perfect, and he didn't have to be. What mattered was that he kept moving forward, guided by his heart, turning pain into purpose. The next day, Barron met with his small but dedicated team to discuss the future of the Stand with Grace campaign. They had already partnered with schools to introduce workshops on empathy and resilience, but Barron wanted to do more. "We need to focus on storytelling," he said during the meeting. "Real stories from real people. If we can show the world the power of grace through their experiences, it will have a greater impact." His team nodded in agreement, brainstorming ways to collect and share these stories. They decided to create a digital platform where individuals could submit their stories anonymously or publicly. Barron himself would highlight a few each week, giving a voice to those who often went unheard. Within days, the platform went live, and the response was overwhelming. Stories poured in from across the country, stories of triumph over adversity, acts of kindness in the face of hatred, and lessons learned from personal struggles. One story, in particular, stood out to Barron. It was from a high school student named Elena, who had been relentlessly bullied for her accent and background as an immigrant. She wrote about how Melania's journey had inspired her to embrace her heritage with pride, and how Barron's speech had given her the courage to speak up against her tormentors. Barron reached out to Elena personally, inviting her to share her story in a live-streamed event. When the day came, her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke about her experiences and her newfound confidence, the audience was captivated. By the end of her speech, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Bridging divides. Barron's campaign began to gain traction in unexpected places. Community leaders, educators, and even politicians reached out, expressing interest in collaborating on initiatives to promote respect and empathy. Slowly but surely, the movement began to transcend political and social divides. One particularly poignant moment came when a senator from the opposing party publicly praised Barron's efforts during a televised interview. "We may not agree on much," she said, "but Barron Trump has shown us that courage and kindness have no political boundaries." The statement sparked a wave of bipartisan support, with leaders from both sides of the aisle pledging to work together on programs inspired by the Stand with Grace campaign. For Barron, it was a powerful reminder that change was possible, even in the most polarized of environments. A quiet victory. One evening, as the family gathered for a quiet dinner, Melania looked at Barron with a mix of pride and gratitude. "You've done something remarkable, my son," she said, "not just for me, but for so many others." Barron smiled, his exhaustion tempered by a sense of fulfillment. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom," he replied. "You're the reason I found my voice." As they finished their meal, the family sat together on the patio, watching the sun set over the ocean. For the first time in weeks, the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the quiet comfort of togetherness. Barron knew the road ahead would still be challenging. There would be more criticism, more obstacles, and more moments of doubt, but he also knew that he wasn't alone. With his family's support and the stories of countless others fueling his resolve, he was ready to keep fighting for a world where grace and respect prevailed. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Barron felt a quiet sense of peace. This wasn't just his fight. It was a collective journey, and together, they were making a difference. This chapter highlights Barron's internal struggles, the growing impact of his campaign, and the personal connections that deepen his commitment. Let me know if you'd like to move to Part 5. The Storm Before the Dawn. As Barron Trump's campaign, Stand with Grace, gained traction, the national spotlight burned brighter than ever. The wave of support was overwhelming, but it came with an undercurrent of tension. Criticism intensified, detractors became more vocal, and the challenges of navigating such a high-profile initiative began to weigh heavily on Barron. The collision of worlds. The Trump family's mansion, usually a sanctuary of calm, became a hub of activity. Staff managed endless calls from media outlets and supporters, while security teams heightened their vigilance due to the uptick in threats and protests. Melania watched with a mother's concern as her son was thrust deeper into a world that even seasoned adults struggled to navigate. One evening, Barron returned home late from a community event. His usually confident demeanor was replaced by visible fatigue. His shoulders slumped under the weight of his responsibilities. Melania was waiting for him in the living room, her expression a mixture of pride and worry. "Barron," she began, her voice soft but firm, "you need to slow down." He dropped his bag by the door and sank into the couch. "I can't, Mom. Every day, more people reach out, more stories come in. They're counting on me." Melania sat beside him, placing a hand on his arm. "You're doing incredible work, my son, but you cannot carry the world on your shoulders alone. You must learn to delegate, to trust others to share the load." Barron sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know you're right. It's just, I feel like if I don't give everything I have, I'm letting people down." Melania's eyes softened. True leadership isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about empowering others to stand with you. You've inspired so many already. Now let them help you. Her words stayed with Barron as he prepared for the next phase of the campaign. A series of town hall meetings across the country aimed at fostering dialogue and understanding. But the road ahead would prove more challenging than he had anticipated. The backlash intensifies. The first town hall was held in a small Midwestern city, where hundreds of people gathered to share their stories and discuss the importance of respect in public discourse. The event began smoothly, with Barron moderating a panel of speakers from diverse backgrounds. Their stories of resilience and grace resonated deeply with the audience. But as the night wore on, tension simmered beneath the surface. A few attendees, emboldened by anonymity, began to heckle Barron, accusing him of being out of touch due to his privileged upbringing. "You talk about understanding struggle," one man shouted, his voice echoing in the hall. "But what do you know about it? You've lived in mansions your whole life." The room fell silent, all eyes on Barron. For a moment, he hesitated, the weight of the accusation pressing on him. But then he took a deep breath, his mother's words echoing in his mind. "Speak with grace and truth." "You're right," Barron began, his voice steady. "I haven't faced the same struggles many people in this room have. I've been privileged in ways I can't deny. But that's exactly why I'm here, not to pretend I understand your experiences, but to listen, to learn, and to use whatever platform I have to amplify your voices." The room erupted in applause, silencing the hecklers. Barron's humility and sincerity won over the crowd, but the incident stayed with him. It was a reminder of the challenges he would face as he sought to bridge divides and build trust. A turning point. As the town hall tour continued, Barron faced both support and skepticism. In some cities, the response was overwhelmingly positive, with communities rallying behind the campaign's message of empathy and respect. In others, the reception was frostier, with protesters accusing him of being a political pawn or dismissing his efforts as performative. The most challenging moment came during an event in a large metropolitan city where tensions between political factions ran high. As Barron prepared to take the stage, a small group of protesters stormed the venue, shouting slogans and disrupting the proceedings. Security intervened, and the situation was de-escalated, but the incident shook Barron. After the event, he sat alone backstage, grappling with the reality of the opposition he faced. His campaign manager, a seasoned activist named Clara, joined him, her expression a mix of empathy and determination. "This isn't easy, Barron," she said, sitting beside him. "Real change never is. But you've already accomplished something incredible. You've started a conversation. That's more than most people ever do." Barron nodded, though the doubt lingered. I want people to see that this isn't about me. It's about all of us." Clara smiled. "And they will. But you have to be patient. Change takes time, And the resistance you're facing is proof that you're making an impact. A global reach. Amid the challenges, Barron's campaign began to gain international attention. Media outlets from around the world reported on the movement, and messages of support poured in from every corner of the globe. Activists, educators, and community leaders reached out, eager to collaborate and adapt the campaign's principles to their own contexts. One particularly meaningful moment came when a group of students from a war-torn country sent a video message to Barron, thanking him for inspiring them to start their own initiative promoting peace and understanding in their community. "These kids are doing incredible work," Barron said during a team meeting, his voice filled with admiration. "If they can find hope in the midst of everything they're facing, then so can we." Inspired by their message, Barron decided to expand the campaign's reach, launching a global initiative called Grace Without Borders. The program focused on fostering empathy and dialogue across cultures, with a special emphasis on supporting young leaders. The power of unity. The culmination of Barron's efforts came during a national summit on empathy and leadership held in Washington, D.C. Leaders from various sectors, education, politics, business, and activism, gathered to discuss practical ways to promote respect and understanding in their fields. Barron delivered the keynote address, speaking from the heart about his journey and the lessons he had learned along the way. "Grace isn't a sign of weakness," he said, his voice resonating through the packed auditorium. "It's a sign of strength. It takes courage to listen, to understand, and to stand up for what's right without tearing others down. That's the kind of strength we need more of in this world." The audience rose to their feet, the applause thunderous. Barron's words had struck a chord, leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. A quiet moment of reflection. That evening, back at the hotel, Barron sat on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Melania joined him, her presence a calming force. "You've done something amazing, Barron," she said, her voice filled with pride. "But remember, this is just the beginning." Barron nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I know, Mom. And I'm ready for whatever comes next." As they sat together, the weight of the journey ahead felt lighter, buoyed by the knowledge that they were making a difference. One step, one story, one act of grace at a time. This chapter captures the intensifying challenges Barron faces, the evolution of his campaign, and the growing global impact of his efforts.